All right, and welcome back to JKLive here at Citizen Television. Joining me live in the studio, the Grand Mullah himself, Senior Counsel Ahmed Nasir Abdullahi is in the house. And over my right shoulder there, all the way in Buffalo, New York, is a former dean of the School of Law at the Buffalo University, State University of New York in Buffalo, Professor Mutunga. He's there, don't worry, it's loading again, we'll connect, don't worry. In the meantime, Grand Mullah, good to see you.
My pleasure, always.
So listen, two former Chief Justices, like literally back to back, going after the president, saying what he has done is disregard of the rule of law. What do you think?
I think the two justices, William Mutunga and Maraga, basically expressed the views of almost 99% of Kenyans. I think everybody is disappointed, everybody is disgusted, everybody is, disillusioned that the president, every time he gets an opportunity to observe the law, breaks it. Yes, he has. I think they were right when they said he's a serial breaker of the law.
But why now, though? Why, like Maraga, literally, it was today that he chose. Why now?
No, but I mean, this thing was building up. I mean, it has reached a crescendo, I mean, if you talk to anybody in this country, you will note that Kenyans just are not happy. Kenyans are, I think we have reached a breaking point on this, disregard of the law, this impunity, this, I mean, they take Kenyans for granted. It's like we don't matter. So I think both Maraga and William Mutunga were expressing the view of Kenyans on this point.
Professor Mutunga, what are your thoughts on that? What do you think?
Well, I think, Jeff, it's really a sad day in a country's history when you have two of the most credible Chief Justices that Kenya has ever produced, call out the head of state for his dereliction of duty, his violation of the Constitution, his disobedience of court orders, and call upon the head of state to resign or be impeached. This is a historic moment, what I think a lot of people might call an inflection point, really, in the country's history. Because I know these two gentlemen, both Mr. Maraga and Dr. Mutunga, do not speak lightly when they say what they have said. And as you know, both of them have agreed totally with each other. So this is a very important inflection point in our country's.
Prof, let me just stand up and just come closer to your screen. Real quick, if you can still hear me, Prof. For the former Chief Justice William Mutunga to ask the president to resign, isn't that stretching it a little too much? If you can hear me, if not, Grand Mullah, what do you think? Wasn't this stretching it too much, asking the president to resign?
No, I think when you look at the litany of laws, the president has broken, when you see his disregard of court orders, when you see that, every act he has taken in the last 2, 3, 4 years have been declared unconstitutional by the courts. I mean, it may be, I think it is too much to expect the president to resign because Willie has asked him. But I think the call, it shows the gravity of the misdemeanors, the president has committed. Yes.
Look, there was a list of 40 judges, 34 were appointed, 6 were left out. If you're in the president's shoes, and he says he had information, he had intel on the 6th.
Now, let me ask you, the president has only intel on 6 judges. I mean, according to him, 2 billion is stolen every day. Doesn't he have intel on who's stealing? I mean, his cabinet is one of the most thieving cabinet you will ever see. Doesn't he have intel on who's stealing money? So what is he doing with all this intel on every aspect of Kenyan lives that's going wrong? I mean, why does he have only intel on 6 judges? But let me come back to that. According to the original list, by the way, these were not the judges that the government fingered, There were 6 different judges. The government has changed these judges with some that were not originally in the list. So, I mean, the credibility of the president saying that, I have intel, it's not even true because previously they said these are the judges they don't want to swear. But now because of, I think, certain dynamics, probably some have lobbied, some have given some concessions here and there, there was substitution,
How do you know this?
No, it was in the JC. There was a statement. It's a matter that if you read the news last week, a former member of the JC, you know, the female representative of the Law Society, made this point that these were not the original list. Yes.
Prof, if you're back with us, the question I had asked, if you can hear me, question I had asked you earlier on, former Chief Justice Willie Mutunga asking the president to resign, isn't that a bit of a stretch?
No, I don't think so. I think, as I said before, I was cut off. I think there may be a conspiracy so that people don't hear what I have to say. But look, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. Go ahead, Prof.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, no, there's no conspiracy. I mean, if you look at what Mr. Kenyatta has done over the last 5 years, in fact, over the last 10 years, I'm surprised that it has taken us this long to say that the man should resign or that he should be impeached. I was going to say that what Mr. Maraga and what Dr. Mutunga have said is very weighty. It's an inflection point in our country's history. These guys do not speak lightly. They have seen our country go down the drain. We are dancing on a cliff, Jeff. And of course, I need to remind my friend, the Grand Mullah, that both Mr. Ruto and Mr. Kenyatta, who head the state, are partly a product of his handiwork. So, he's sitting there crying and complaining, but he was responsible for them being in power.
You hear that, Grand Mullah? He's saying you're responsible for them being in power. You.
No. Let us, let's not confuse two issues. I mean, these guys won elections, and nobody can dispute that. But the disregard of a law is something else. I mean, we haven't. When we voted for them, we didn't tell them to, disregard the law. We didn't tell them to, abuse the constitution. We didn't tell them to tear the constitution down. We didn't tell them to disobey court orders. I mean, you can't hold the electorate every time someone they have elected becomes, rogue. I mean, those are two different issues.
But Grand Mullah, let's just be honest here. Did we not tell you in 2012 and 2013 and 2017 that you should not elect and re-elect these people?
But what you don't tell people is that the person you are telling Kenyans should elect is the water carrier now, isn't he?
No, but that's not the point.
That's the point.
Grand Mullah is a record of these two individuals who have been in power for almost 10 years. Can you deal with that?
Yeah, but
can you take responsibility
Prof,
for giving Kenyans, Mr. Kenyatta and Mr. Ruto?
Prof, you can't lay
responsibility, my friend.
You can't lay the blame on just one man. They were elected after all, even though in 2017 the election was annulled. Remember, first round? You remember?
Yeah, of course I do, but I'm not putting all of it on the Grand Mullah, but he's the one who's in front of me. Yeah. He's the one I'm looking at.
No, but I think that...
So first of all, I just want him to acknowledge that fact, and then we can move on. The point that I think I'm trying to make is that Dr. Mutunga and Mr. Maraga have held their fire for a long time. Of course, Mr. Maraga has criticized Mr. Kenyatta in the past for disobeying court orders. But for a fact that Mr. Maraga did not go this far in the past. I think he's had it, and I think Kenyans have had it. And I think, my friend Amanasio agrees that Kenyans have had it. I don't think that we can wait as Kenyans for this term of office for Mr. Kenyatta and Mr. Ruto to end, so that not just one of them, but that the two of them can go home together. They have inflicted enough pain on Kenyans already.
Gremlin, you were saying something?
No, I mean, Prof has always a potent argument, but he dilutes his argument with certain biases. So when he says Ruto and Uhuru should go together, I thought he knows that they have left one another a long time ago, and the coalition that is wreaking havoc now is between the president and the prime minister, former prime minister. That's the coalition that's in power. And that's what Professor needs to address and tell Kenyans, that these coalition partners, because they are running the country together, should go together.
Well, Prof, what do you say about that?
Well, I just want to say that if you look at the last 10 years of the Kenyatta, leadership of the country with its deputy, you have seen a growing mountain of debt. The country is indebted as never before. You have seen penury and suffering among Kenyans like we've never seen before. You've seen disobedience of court orders like we've never seen before. You have seen our country fracture. In fact, quite frankly, and I think the Grand Mullah should agree with me on this, I'm afraid about what's going to happen in 2022 because the political landscape is so broken. I don't know whether anyone can be elected in 2022 to bring Kenyans together and to snatch us back from the precipice. I'm really worried. I mean, I feel the way I felt in 2007, 2006, 2007, when, there was this contest between Mr. Kibaki on the one hand and Mr. Odinga on the other. And of course, we know what happened because the landscape was so broken. I remember predicting at the Stanley Hotel on December 10th, 2007, that election was going to be contested and that whoever would lose the election would not accept defeat. And that I predicted at the time that Kenya might go to civil war. And of course, as you know, Jeff, we did go to a civil war. It was contained, but it was a civil war between Kenyans. I fear that today we are looking at the same cliff. We are looking down the barrel of a gun. And, I'm not saying that the judge's issue is not important. It's, of course, very, very important. But it's a symptom of a state that has rotten, a state that has decayed, a state that has failed, because the leadership has failed.
Grand Mullah, what do you say to that?
I think nobody disputes that. Everybody agrees with Professor that the last 5 years have been very profound for this country. Everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. The state, I agree with him, is almost failed. The institutions are broken. Nothing works in this country. The economy is, it has gone, it's over. Kenyans are really struggling. If you talk to ordinary Kenyans, if you go to talk to the middle class, it's only the thief in 1%, that's comfortable. But I think the thing that's more profound is that this country faces, great danger going forward. Institutions really have failed. Nothing works in this country. Maybe the police and the army, because they personifies, the institutions that hold people to power. But if you look at other institutions, nothing works. Nothing works. And that's why, as we go to 2020, 2022, the danger becomes, more just huge, huge.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Ahmed, because look, if you just look at the signs, the various signs that are out there, let us, for example, take this question of judges. And of course, I think that we are all upset that, that Mr. Kenyatta has not seen it fit to swear in 6 judges who are stellar jurists. Those who know Professor Njorogungi, know that perhaps, with all due respect to senior counsel on the national here, Abdullahi, Professor Njorogungi is arguably Kenya's greatest jurist. How can this individual not be gazetted and elevated to the Court of Appeal? How is that possible? How is it possible, Jeff? How is it possible, Grand Mullah, that we have an opaque process at the JSC electing judges?
Prof,
the JSC will not release the marking scheme and the grades for the people they interviewed.
Prof, I was just telling the Grand Mullah, Prof.
They have not done so.
Yeah, but
why would the JSC, led by the Chief Justice, our new Chief Justice, Justice Maraga, who, by the way, is my friend for a long time, why would they go to State House to witness the swearing in of 34 judges when 6 have been left out? Why would they condone that illegality or that conduct? That is a clear violation of the Constitution.
Prof.
So I'm calling into question here, the morality and the legitimacy, not just of the executive, at the head of state. I'm also questioning the judiciary. Why would they put themselves in that position?
Okay.
Why would they not tell Mr. Kenyatta, look, either you swear all of us in or you swear none of us in?
But Prof,
and why should the CJ go there to participate in a ceremony that, quite frankly, was a violation of the Constitution and the law?
but Prof, you know, while you were dialing up, I was just telling the Grand Mullah, according to reports, the president said he had intel on the 6th. That's what he said.
Yeah, but look, Jeff, I mean, that is like a dog whistle. You know what a dog whistle is? It is when you want to malign someone, you know, but you have no facts to do it with. You know, Mr. Kenyatta has 4 members in the Judicial Service Commission, you know, either whom he has appointed or who represent the executive, okay? The place for him to have raised questions of integrity for those 6 judges was at the JSC. He has the Attorney General sitting there. Did the Attorney General come and tell the JSC that we have, you know, incriminating information against these 6 people? The President's responsibility for the Constitution, once the JSC nominates candidates, his responsibility is ceremonial and ministerial. He's like a clerk. His job is to swear in the people he has been given. There is no other responsibility for him. He cannot raise another issue. If he thinks that there's a judge who is compromised or a judge who is corrupt, let them give that information to the investigating authorities after the fact. Let them investigate, and then we can go from there.
Prof, you just mentioned the Chief Justice, Martha Koome. Grand Mullah, let me ask you this. If you were her right now, if you were in her place, how do you think she's thinking or she's feeling about this?
I think she's just in office, I think, for 3-4 weeks. She has 10 more years to go. She hasn't started very well, in my view. I think, as I agree with Professor Makau, that going to State House to participate in this process, when you know that courts have said that this judge's piece won't together or not, allowing the president to cherry pick, participating in that process isn't just great. It was completely wrong. It was unconstitutional. And I think I agree with Prof. I mean, it looked so bad for judges. You're not rushed to State House to be sworn when they left back 6 judges whom they know the president was deliberately victimizing them. That didn't look nice. I mean, you know, the rush, I mean, there was in such a great rush to be sworn in. I think that doesn't look nice. I mean, they've been waiting for 2 years. Some have been waiting for 3 years. And both Willie Mutunga and both Maraga refused this cherry picking.
Yeah,
and also this, I mean, if I talk about the intel...
You know, my good friend, Nasser, you know, we completely agree on this particular issue. It is the judiciary is responsible for safeguarding its own independence from executive overreach and overlordship. No one else is responsible for safeguarding judicial independence but the judiciary itself. So we cannot have the judges taking themselves to the slaughterhouse. What happens to solidarity between the judges? And what happened to these judges whose names have been maligned? Are they credible judges now? What will litigants appearing before them think? Will they think that Professor Uhuru, for example, is corrupt, and so therefore he has no legitimacy to hand down a judgment? What are we to think? Are they going to be investigated? These are very serious questions. And Mr. Kenyatta cannot just sit there and say that he has some, you know, nasty intelligence in his back pocket. Let him produce it. You know, Kenya is not a country of men or women. It's a country of laws, or we like to think it's a country of laws, governed by law, not governed by the whims of one individual.
Yeah.
And this is what makes me so angry, Jeff. What makes me so angry? And it's a symptom of a malaise, of a cancer in the presidency, a cancer that both Chief Justice Mutunga, former Chief Justice Mutunga, and former Chief Justice Maraga have said that cancer should be exiled. You know, I know, Jeff, you and I have debated about this question, whether Mr. Kenyatta was legitimate or not, and so on and so forth. There was a time, you know, when I would have actually asked you to take me to State House so I could go and give him my piece of advice so that he could become a better leader. Okay? But that time is gone. It's just gone. The guy has, to use a legal term, screwed up.
All right, Grand Mullah, you were saying something about Intel a moment ago.
No, I mean, I agree with him. I mean,
you guys are agreeing too much together now.
This is the first time the president is acting on Intel. I mean, he gets thousands of Intels every day. Why doesn't he act on all this Intel? But I agree with Prof and everybody who has said on this point. There is no credible Intel that the president has on these judges. If he has something credible, he will have shared with the public so that he could scandalize them. That he is quiet is clear testimony that he has nothing on them. And I can tell you he has nothing on them because he will have told us.
Should the 6 be reinstated?
Should?
The 6.
They are already there. They should be sworn, I mean, they are judges of the High Court. Some of them are magistrates. I mean, I agree with the Prof. I mean, these are some of the best judges in this country has. They have been punished, some of them, because of the BPI, judgment. And that's, that makes it worse. That the president can be so petty, and I think Prof. William Mutunga said this, that the president can take revenge against the judges because they have delivered a judgment, shows so bad. I mean, it is, I mean, people should read what Willie really wrote in those 4 pages.
Yeah, absolutely, Ahmed. And of course, people can disagree on BBI, okay? People can disagree on BBI. People can disagree on whether the Constitution ought to be amended. Okay, those are disagreements, okay, that people can have. Legal disagreements, political disagreements, and they have disagreed. But to destroy a person's career because they have read a law book and they have read the Constitution and they have interpreted the Constitution and the laws of Kenya to say that that process was unconstitutional, that process was illegitimate, that process was illegal. To destroy them because they have done their job as judges is beneath the dignity of the office that Mr. Kenyatta holds. The proper place to go is to go to the Court of Appeal, to go there and plead your case and see if those judges there will see it differently. It is not to be petty to destroy a young man like Professor Mbuki. It is not to do that. It is really a shame, and I think both Hamid and I, there are times in which we just feel sad to be Kenyan, and this is one of those moments.
Prof,
and I hope, Jeff, that you also feel the same way because although you are the arbiter here between the two of us, you're also a Kenyan, and I'm sure you don't condone this kind of conduct. I'm sure you do not.
Prof, you just mentioned BBI. Is it dead in the water? Has reggae stopped, in your opinion?
Well, I think so. I mean, where do I start? I'll just make it quick. But I'll say this. I'll say that both Mr. Kenyatta and Mr. Odinga got off on the wrong foot, okay, with this BBI process. I think they had bad advisors, quite frankly. They had bad legal advisors and they had bad political advisors. The Constitution provides a roadmap as to how it can be amended. And the Constitution says that when you are trying to amend it, you run within the bounds that it has provided. You cannot go outside the Constitution to find ways to amend it. Okay? What the judges said in that very pithy, erudite ruling was that Mr. Kenyatta and Mr. Odinga, but more so Mr. Kenyatta because he's the one who controls the state, ran out of bounds with the ball. You cannot run out of bounds with the ball and come back and score. Can't do that. There are rules. They ran out of bounds because they're bad advisors. They took a state project and tried to make it a people's project. Okay? They took, the power of the IEBC and added into that document 70 constituencies. which I might add, most of them are in Mount Kenya.
Which was approved from county level to the Senate to the House.
And even those ones which are in Nairobi are in areas of Nairobi that are dominated by folks from Mount Kenya. So even on that particular score, Mr. Odinga did not get much from Mr. Kenyatta. But what I'm saying, that's another illegality, because the job of the limiting constituencies, adding them or reducing them, that is the job of the IEBC. You know, so there are so many problems there that what do I see coming forward? What does my crystal ball tell me? My crystal ball tells me that when you have lawyers looking at an issue, you are likely to get multiple opinions. So I predict that, number one, either the Court of Appeal throws out, in whole or in part, the lower court's ruling, the high court ruling. So it could either throw out the entire thing or throw out certain parts of it and uphold others. You know, so that's what's likely to happen there.
Okay, let me get the Grand Mullah's.
But let me just say this.
Yeah.
Even if part of the BBI bill is upheld by the Court of Appeal, the process has suffered a deficit of legitimacy.
Okay, Grand Mullah.
Political processes are about legitimacy.
Okay, your thoughts?
What the High Court did was to pull the rug from under the BBI process. So I don't know whether it can be recovered.
Let me get the Grand Mullah's thoughts on that, Prof.
I don't know whether it's recoverable.
Okay, has reggae stopped?
No, first, you know, I mean, let us appreciate BBI. I mean, BBI was a fraud, I said many times. I mean, it's a legal fraud that cannot be sanitized through a court. There is no court, you take it from me, there is no court that can validate the BBI process as a constitutional roadmap for amending the Constitution. What I think, what amazes people like me is the audacity, you know, of the President and the Prime Minister, you know, to take the route they have taken, because they were either so contemptuous of every person in this country, or they thought nobody could stop this. And I think that's why, you know, I mean, why they reacted the way they reacted when the court stopped. And the court, I mean, if you look at that judgment, if you look at the petitions the parties filed, I mean, there was no other alternative, because you will not find a court that says BPI is a legitimate process to amend the Constitution. The President cannot amend the Constitution as a person. And even the Supreme Court, you know, I mean the Court of Appeal, the question before the Court of Appeal is that, was BPI a popular initiative? I mean, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old Kenyan will tell you that it was not. It is a property, it was something that belongs to Uhuru, President, and the Prime Minister. So, I mean, it's not really the process for me that stinks, you know. It is the audacity, you know, the mere fact that they can take that route, the mere fact that they can ignore everybody else and say that you guys don't count, 2 of us count, and we will pass through this route. So, I mean, that process is dead in my view. I mean, I don't think any court in this country can validate BPI. Take it from me.
So I did not come here to agree with the Grand Mullah all the time, but it appears that he's agreeing with me, and that's fine. I know. Prof is a little bit sympathetic to BBI.
No, I know it.
Ahmed, let me say this to you.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the 2020 Constitution, the document is imperfect. Okay, we can agree on that.
Yes.
And we can agree that any constitution written anywhere in the world is an imperfect document that can always be improved upon, because constitutions are products of political compromise. And ours, the 2020 Constitution in particular, was, you know, a political compromise between contending elite interests. There's no question about that. There are many things that I would like to see amended in that Constitution. So, for example, just to give you 1 or 2 examples, I would like the Constitution to be amended to make it very difficult for the executive to go borrowing money like a drunken sailor. You know? Yeah. I mean, you know, when, for example, the executive goes to China or God knows where to borrow all these dollars or yen or whatever they are called, you know, where are the checks and balances? Who has tried to stop them from borrowing like this? You know, putting future generations into penury and poverty, perhaps for 100 years to come. Other countries are going to own Kenya because of this borrowing. I'd like to see this amended to make it very difficult for the executive to borrow. I'd like to see the Constitution amended to make it easier for either the president or the deputy president to be impeached when they cannot work together. Because you cannot elect people for 5 years and then they spend 5 years fighting.
You have the Grand Mullah laughing at that.
There ought to be a way to impeach one of them or to impeach both.
1 second, Prof. Okay, Grand Mullah, I heard you laugh there.
No, I mean, Prof is flogging his pet subjects, of the president either fired the deputy prime minister. Those are temporal issues. But I agree with him that the constitution is not perfect. It can be amended. I think the questions Kenyans are raising, or the difficulty they had with BPI, is why is it the president and the prime minister that are bringing this amendment? I mean, why is it not a popular initiative? Why don't you go back to Wanjiku and ask her, how can we improve this constitution? But when the people...
Ahmed, I agree with that. What I was trying to say was that if this was a popular initiative, the way it should have been, the issues I'm raising would have been raised properly in a properly conducted constitutional amendment process.
Okay, so the question is, Grand Mullah, between now and August 9th, 2022, any chance of a referendum?
I think it's very slim, very, very slim, because, I mean, if you look at the calendar of the court, I mean, the Court of Appeal is listening this matter the last week of June, the first 2-3 days of July. Give them a month or a month and a half to write the judgment. You are in August. If someone goes to the Supreme Court, you are in October, November. I think it's not viable. But that's, you see, I mean, why Kenyans are complaining is that why are the political elite, especially the president and the prime minister, prioritizing PPI? This country is facing bigger difficulties. There are bigger challenges that's facing this country. Why don't they, for example, prepare this country for election in 2022 so that we have a peaceful election, so that we have an orderly election? What's this obsession with changing certain dynamics of the country, trying to, make it easy for someone to win an election or someone not to win an election? I mean, BPI is a very petty agenda of two people, the president and the prime minister, and that's why it sucks.
What does that say about the future of the handshake?
The handshake is, before we talk about the future, did it have a past and a present? It doesn't, because, I mean, the handshake is, I think, I don't want to be very critical of the deputy prime minister, but I think he's been treated very badly, if you ask me. There is nothing for him in the handshake. What is it? He is hoping against hope that one day the president will say that he's the right candidate, and that will never happen, we all know. So, I mean, he lives on hope. He lives on hope.
You're talking about the former prime minister?
Yes.
Prof, what do you think?
Let me just say this to you. I mean, I don't think that the idea of a handshake, the concept, was a bad one. And I'll tell you why it was not a bad one. You were living in Kenya at the time yourself. You saw what was happening. We were headed down a cliff. Okay? When that happens in any country, and especially in a fragile post-colonial African state, it behooves the elites to come together to find a way to reduce violence and to lower political temperatures. That's what they did. And in fact, that is one thing I agree with, that they lowered political temperatures.
Prof, what about the future of the handshake then? We agree with that. It brought about peace.
However, what they did after the handshake that I think has brought them into disrepute and has caused problems. Like I said before, if you think that Kenya has particular fundamental fractures that should be fixed, then do it the right way. Go to the people, let them decide what it should be amended and what should not be amended. And I would say that in the context of Corona, for example, when it was clear that businesses were affected deeply, that people lost their income, that things came to a standstill. Even in this country where I am, the most powerful economy in the world. When that happened, I think it behooved Mr. Kenyatta and Mr. Odinga to take stock and pause this process of trying to amend the Constitution to deal with these particular problems that people face. Because I do not know whether, at the end of the day, even if the BI passes, whether it will be able to repair these people, who are out of a job, to be able to fix businesses that have been devastated by COVID-19. There are these problems there.
You still haven't you haven't answered the question, Prof. The future of the handshake, real quick.
Did you ask me that question?
I did.
Oh, I see. Well, look, I have said before that, and I was very wary of not the handshake per se, as I've said. I was worried about what came afterwards. And I was worried because I thought that Mr. Kenyatta would use the failures of his regime to pawn off those failures on Mr. Odinga, or to find cover for those failures, from Mr. Odinga, to shield himself from the people's anger against the failures of his regime. And it appears to me that this is what he has done. So I think Mr. Odinga is now stuck with this legacy of Mr. Kenyatta. It's a legacy that stinks to high heaven. And I don't know how he recovers from that. I think just last week I advised Mr. Odinga through Twitter. I'd like to think that I'm part of the ODM Politburo. I'm not. But I advised him, I said, exit the handshake. It's an albatross around your neck. It is weighing you down.
All right, Prof. Hold that thought. You had the advice.
No, but what Professor Macau will not admit, and which is very obvious, is that if you look at, the mistakes the president made in the last 3-4 years, if you look at, the degradation of the rule of law, if you look at the attack on the judiciary the last 3 years, the president's action, he was emboldened by the fact that Raila was in his camp. All these things that happened in this country happened because, one, the executive has become a one person, which is the president, and there is no opposition that provides checks and balances because the opposition are in the president's back pocket. So that is what people like Professor Macau will not admit, that the BPI caused enormous harm, not only to the rule of law, but also to the structures and institutions of this country, because this country became a one-man rule with some few sidekicks here and there, including my friend's boss.
But I think what you're directly trying... Hold on, Prof. Hold on, Prof. Prof, hold on. Before you go on, what you're trying to say... Hold on, Prof.
Let you get away with that. That is called intellectual murder. Committing intellectual murder. Listen, it's a fact that, up to 2017, that the state, that the Kenyatta group of states had gone off the rails. Okay? It's a fact. A lot of the borrowing, a lot of the violations of the law, a lot of the disagreements between the judiciary and the executive had taken place even before Mr. Odinga came on the scene.
You can argue that all day long. You can both argue that. Prof, you can both argue that till the cows come home, but let's face it, the country has been peaceful since 2018, since the handshake. At least there's that.
Of course, but I'm just...
Hold on, Prof.
The country has been peaceful since 2013. It was peaceful since 2013.
So you can sleep better tonight. I agree with you that Mr. Odinga's movement towards Mr. Kenyatta and the stilling of his voice of criticism of the state, the ability to check the belief
all right.
in the presidency.
Okay, Prof, we're going to have to take a break there.
That's damage And that, in fact, allowed a lot of these excesses to continue unchecked and even to multiply. So I agree with that. Everyone can see that.
Yeah, you guys.
I mean, why is it that you?
I have to take a break there, Prof.
Here,
okay.
Criticizing the executive, and ODM is silent. Why is it?
That's because we have a democracy. You can criticize whenever you want. You can switch sides whenever you want.
No.
Let's take a break, bro.
But I'm saying that ODM should be the one carrying the baton of the opposition.
We're going to have to take a break on that.
Where is my friend Kalonzo Musyoka?
Grand Mullah.
Where is my good friend Musalia Mudavadi?
All right, let's take a break.
You need a mute button.
Let's take a break, come back, and we'll go to your questions and comments as well. Stay with us. Wow. What a conversation. Keep tweeting at Jeff at Citizen TV Kenya, the hashtag JKLive. JKLive takes a break. We'll be back in a moment.